Is it that we can mitigate to avoid dangerous climate change? It's a big question. What do you reckon?
We can't.
We can't?
We won't. It's possible.
Well, we can't and we won't are two completely different things, isn't it? So how likely is somewhere between those, isn't it? Well, how would we do it, I guess? In the Paris Agreement in 2016 is probably the current agreement we have with the United Nations and 187 nations, not including the US anymore, have agreed, and that the Paris Agreement was to limit warming to well below 2 degrees of global warming. That's what we all agreed, that's what we all signed up for. Tony Abbott signed up for that one. Can we do that? Well, here's sort of a graph. We're showing here, in the grey we have historical emissions, global emissions of carbon dioxide, gigatons per year, stacks of it. You can see it's kind of going up, and it's 2015, it's still going up. Approximate emission pledges. This is what the Paris said. If we want to stay below 2 degrees warming, we need to get our emissions net zero by the end of the century, maybe even by 2050. You can kind of see this is our trajectory. This is what we need to be doing. This is emissions, estimated emissions of fossil fuels industry and net land use change. This is the more optimistic get down there. Can we do that? Well, again, you think it's unlikely. It is a choice we make. It's not going to be an easy thing to do. You can see, turn that graph around. It's like turning a big ship around. Again here, I told you I liked figures. Rates of decarbonisation required. What this graph here shows, again, this is our emissions per year. And then we have 3 things going on here. If we don't start turning our emissions out, if we don't start mitigating and lowering our emissions for the next 10 years, this is how quickly we need to drop down in order to stay below that 2 degrees level. It gets very steep very quickly. If we start mitigating in 2018, this is the black line here, this is a graph's a year old clearly, that's kind of the rate we've got to go at. The black line in the middle there. It's also pretty steep, but it's not as steep. So this is really a question of the quicker we make that decision, the quicker we bite the bullet, so to speak, the better chance we have. These blue lines then is how our rate of decrease would have been if we had started, in 2000, 2001, 2, and you can see the dramatic difference that would have made if 20 years ago we had made those decisions. So again, it's going to be hard. Here we see just 2 examples, Denmark and Sweden, who have chosen to mitigate, and you can see that Sweden especially, this really steep drop in the 70s and 80s. Denmark, late 90s, early 2000s, when they decided to make a significant effort to decarbonise their economy, to take out coal, to limit their car use and things like that. The other thing we can do, of course, negative emissions, carbon dioxide removal, those options do exist. The thing about a lot of these is they're expensive. What are our options for decarbonisation, for removal of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere? Well, afforestation and reforestation, replanting trees or removing trees is certainly a good option. We've cut down a lot of trees over the last couple of 100 years. We've got a lot of trees to plant, but every tree we plant, of course, sucks in carbon dioxide, removes it from the atmosphere. Carbon capture and storage. There are a number of ways we can do carbon capture and storage. We can do ocean seeding is a really good one, but there are capture, compression, transport, fuel upgrading. Going to LNG as opposed to coal is a good way of doing it. High biomass yield crops that suck in the carbon dioxide. Different energy products, biomethane, biohydrogen, synthetic biofuels. And the other option we have then, direct CO2 removal. This is an excellent bit of kit where pretty much it just sucks air in, scrubs carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. It works on that scale. It's a very expensive thing to do. Is it going to work on a global scale? We'll see about that. And the point is, it's easier to keep the carbon dioxide in the ground as coal than it is to put it into the air and then suck it back again. My last slide on this one is just looks at finance and insurance sector. And this is really about, this is a great little word map. How are we going to do this mitigation? From an insurance point of view, this insurance industry, the finance industry do take this very seriously because for them it's all about money. The more climate disaster there is, the more insurance premiums they pay out. So they're starting to look at what are the physical risks? Changing climate conditions, extreme weather events, direct damage to assets or property. But there's also transition risk. How much does it cost to transition to that new environment? And that's really, I'll talk about this more later with renewable energy, that's really an issue for us. What is the cost of transitioning? What's our liability risk? But then, we had done surveys recently, they're starting to show that people are, you've all turned up tonight and you're all clearly thinking about climate change as an impact. We can start making choices, we need to start making choices. So this, their survey last thing, what actions are we taking? Peer agency cooperation, industry engagement, enhanced supervisory action, keeping an eye on people. So in summary, we can mitigate to avoid dangerous climate change. The longer we delay, the harder that becomes. We need to make some decisions about how we're going to do that, and that's a political thing more so than a science question. We really, need our politicians, our leaders to be making those decisions, having those conversations with us.